I'm Ken Campbell, and here in my shed with all this paraphernalia, I'm going to recreate the experiments which changed the world. This radioactive stuff shaped 20th century science. This radium gave us everything from the atomic bomb to understanding the structure of matter. It emerged from a great pile of dirt, and I went on a journey to find out how. A silhouette. Isolate the active element. This is the story of radium and the woman who discovered it, Marie Curie. My journey begins on a train destined for Paris, the city that Marie travelled to in October 1891. She was leaving Poland and her old life behind her. From a young age, she'd had an overwhelming desire to study science. But in Poland, women weren't allowed to go to university. Undeterred, Marie scrimped and saved for 8 years to get to Paris, the land of liberty, where university doors would be open to her. That day now rushed towards her. Marie arrived in France at a time when Paris was the city of innovation. She was a misfit, both a foreigner and a woman in a man's world. Here at the Sorbonne, she studied science. She was one of just a handful of women. For the next 2 years, Marie worked hard, very hard indeed.
She was a foreigner and she was a woman surrounded by French-speaking people. I think in the classroom she was probably very much treated cordially by the young Frenchmen. It would be more in the street that she might be treated differently.
Yeah, Marie, having very little money, lived mainly on bread and butter every little once in a long while. She had an egg, an earth, and cherries had been recorded, and also radishes. Come here, monsieur. Yeah. She fainted one time in a lecture, and they said, "What have you eaten?" And they really pressed her on the point, and it turned out, over 3 days, that's all she'd eaten, a bunch of radishes. Missy.
She was so focused on this opportunity to be a student, and that was so much the center of things for her that I think the poverty didn't matter at all. In fact, she described later that this period as a period in which she felt a precious sense of liberty.
Marie's hunger for knowledge paid off, and she graduated from the Sorbonne with top marks. She planned to go home to Poland and become a science teacher, but this never happened because that spring she fell in love.
Through a Polish acquaintance, she was introduced to Marie Curie. And she describes seeing him that very first time. She clearly was struck by him, attracted to him. He was a quiet, thoughtful, shy kind of person. And very quickly, they formed a strong attachment.
Before meeting Marie, Pierre had given up on love. He was a promising scientist and thought that romance would interfere with his work. I met Marie's granddaughter, Hélène Langevin-Joliot. She described to me the impression that her grandmother made on Pierre.
I'm sure that probably 2 or 3 days after the first meeting, Pierre was convinced he wished to marry her.
Right.
In spite of the fact that when he was young, yes, he has written, "Women with genius are rare."
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And he found one. He found one.
Right. Pierre begged Marie to stay in Paris and marry him. After a year of persuasion, she gave in. Soon they would embark on a scientific life together. whilst the Curies were enjoying married life, scientists were pondering the meaning of matter. They had thought that pure substances known as elements only produced one kind of energy.
For centuries the thinking had been this, that you can only get energy out of an element if you combine it with another element in a chemical reaction. This here's a strip of magnesium, an element. I kick-started in the flame there, and there we are. We got the magnesium combining with the oxygen in the air, giving us all this energy, all this heat and light. But this idea was about to change.
Energy, discovered by scientist Henri Becquerel.
Here's what Henri Becquerel found in 1896. He takes a photographic plate, places it on thick black paper, wraps up plate, takes a small lump of phosphorescent substance containing uranium, puts it on top of black paper, leaves it some hours, removes phosphorescent substance, unwraps plate, develops plate, and then he finds on the developed plate he's got a silhouette of that substance, silhouette of deep intensity. Something must be in that phosphorescent substance which is capable of getting through the black paper and onto the plate.
Becquerel showed that uranium emitted a new kind of energy. No one knew what it was. Around the time of Becquerel's discovery, Marie Curie was looking for a doctoral thesis. She was intrigued by Becquerel's surprising find and wanted to know if other substances gave off a strange radiance like uranium. Choosing this as her thesis was the most important decision of her life. She knew that Becquerel's rays made the air conduct electricity, so she used an instrument, a primitive version of my Geiger counter, to detect this electrical activity. She tested hundreds of different substances. Within months came a dramatic revelation. A mined, coal-like substance called pitchblende gave off far more energy than uranium. Marie was puzzled. She knew that pitchblende was mostly made of well-known substances which didn't give off any energy at all.
So from this, she had to conclude that there was some other element in pitchblende, some great unknown element there that was giving off huge amounts of energy.
Now Marie was on the hunt for an unknown element that emitted a strange radiance, like Becquerel's uranium.
These are Marie Curie's actual laboratory notebooks. Look at this one. You can see where the acids have eaten into the cover. Maybe that's where she held it with her thumb. And here we are. This is the 19th of April. She realises she's on the track of a new element, and she thinks she's going to find it with just 100 grams of pitchblende. And she details herself every step of the way now.
With this handful of dirt, Marie stepped into the unknown. Pierre joined his wife in her search for a new element. It was the start of a scientific partnership.
Well, they shared a great passion for science and excitement about science. That was what began it. Each brought something to the other that was very valuable. Pierre was a more joyful person, I think, than Marie. Marie had had a very sad childhood and upbringing, and there was a kind of seriousness about her. And I think Pierre leavened Marie in important ways.
They started off ridiculously optimistically with just 100 grams of pitchblende. It was the first step in a very long haul. Soon they would be working with tons of the stuff. I'm off to ask an expert what Marie Curie did with this pitchblende. Dr. Alessandra Quadrelli is a chemist here at Cambridge University.
So, what should we be doing?
Well, I've got 50 bags of pitchblende, and like Madame Curie did, I want to hunt out a new element.
Looks about right.
Marie's element was hiding somewhere in this pitch blend, mixed up with lots of other stuff, like a needle in a giant haystack.
What you want to do is separate the elements that are in there and keep concentrating your amount of the active element.
Isolate the active element.
Exactly.
Isolate the active element. Right, and then how do I do that?
What are we going to do? We're going to put our 100 grams in here. Now we're going to attack it with acid, which is the first separation step. Okay? So here I'm pouring carefully because it's a very active material. Keep adding, keep adding, keep adding. All right. You see all the bubbles. What it means is that the acid is reacting with some of the pitch blend that we've put. So it's eating out some of the compounds and it's leaving the other ones.
She was testing loads of acids to see which ones would eat away the unwanted compounds, just to leave her with a with a bit of magic
good
left.
Stuff. Exactly, but sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't work. All right, so it has basically stopped fizzing. So we'll move over there where I have a filter set up. We have to pour this over the filter.
Yes.
And isolate the solid. All right. And you see how clear the filtration is, and all the dark solid that hasn't been attacked by the acid staying over.
Now Marie had separated something, but she had to work out where her element was. Was it in the liquid, or was it in the solid?
So we have actually separated something. The first one, the liquid, let's see. No activity. So all of this that does not contain activity can be chucked away. The solid does show an activity, fantastic. The magic element is here. But the problem here is that you have the magic element and tons of other useless things. So Marie Curie had to repeat this separation over and over and over.
With each acid, Marie removed unwanted compounds in her pitch blend and got a step closer to finding her element. The hard slog had just begun. She had no idea what hard times and heartache lay ahead.
These, she reckoned, were the happiest days of her life, Madame Curie. Bringing tons of foul-smelling pitch blend, stirring it all round with a 10-ton stirring pole, putting in noxious acids. Happiest days they were. That went on happily for years.
Well, she was working very, very long hours. What's really amazing is she was also pregnant through part of this and had a child in the middle of all this, working extremely hard in cold and in soot. And with absolutely no precautions at the time because the dangers were not understood. So it was difficult, but it was also very exciting.
4 years homing in on her new element. She had no idea it was one of the most dangerous substances in the world.
June the 6th, 1898. 150 times more active than uranium. June the 27th, 1898, 300 times more active than uranium. November the 11th, 1898, 900 times greater than uranium. March the 28th, 1902, Pierre, we got it!
At last, Marie's mysterious substance officially existed. Chemical analysis confirmed that she had a brand new element. At night, she and Pierre returned to their workroom. To their delight, as a liquid, it glowed in the dark. Holding hands, they stood transfixed by their luminous bottles that danced around them like fairy lights. They christened their magical substance radium.
50 tons of water, 6 tons of chemicals, 1 ton of pitch blend gave her 6 grains of radium. And that was enough to change the world.
Marie's radium demonstrated that an element, a pure substance, spontaneously leaked energy. It was unequivocal proof of radioactivity.
This wasn't just another element. This was an element that was radioactive, and this was the word that she and Pierre quickly coined, radioactive. That meant that it was giving off energy.
Radium caught the imagination of the scientific community, and the Curie's story caught the imagination of the press.
In 1903, they won the Nobel Prize for their discovery of radioactivity, and they became instantly enormously famous and popular in France. And they were hounded by the press. They were absolutely plagued by the press. They would come home at night and people would be waiting to interview them. They would interview their daughter, who was 4 at the time. They wanted to interview the cat.
News of radium set the world on fire. It was hailed a wonder drug. The Curies were swept up in the world's excitement of their discovery.
Yeah, the Curies got into some wonderfully wacky antics. One time, Marie Curie bound a sample of radioactive stuff to his arm. He kept it bound there for about 10 hours. When he removed it, he saw it had left a red burn mark, and he was inspired to keep a journal of the progress of this red burn mark. By the 10th day, he's noticing that the burn mark is way more angry, and by the 20th day, he's excitedly plotting the flows of pus and the formations, the exact formations of the mountains of pus crust. The excitement being here that obviously radioactive stuff destroys living tissue, so just possibly it might destroy cancer cells. Anyway, by the 40th day, skin is kind of reforming. By the 52nd day, it's pretty much disappeared, except for this little grey spot, which Pierre proudly declares to be the sign of a deeper injury.
Little did Pierre and Marie know that their wonderment of radioactivity would be so short-lived.
It's sometime after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's not like today, it's raining. It's some kind of monsoon. Pierre's got his umbrella up, and Marie Curie is approaching the Rue Dauphine. He's stepping out into the road, and at the same time, there's a large wagon, a horse-drawn wagon. The driver sees a tram coming up the Quai de Conti. He's stepping out actually behind a little horse and carriage, and at the same time now is coming down that heavy wagon. Pierre's knocked, he's holding on now to the horse, he's twisted round by the horse, and the driver steers this way so that the front 2 wheels completely miss the prone body of Marie Curie, but the left rear wheel goes straight over his head.
The shock was terrible, and I would say Marie was never the same after. And the problem for her was to convince herself to continue living. And she wrote something like, "My Pierre, how many times did you say to me yourself that if you didn't have me, you might work, but you would be nothing more than a body without soul. And how will I find a soul when mine is left with you?" Really, it was a terrific turning point in Marie's life.
After Pierre's death, Marie was kept going by her daughters, Eve and Irene. With difficulty, she pieced her life back together. But 4 years later, she was plunged into turmoil. She applied to be the first female member of the Academy of Sciences. The institute, which had enormous power and influence in scientific life, refused to let her in. Then she became embroiled in a sexual scandal which shook France. She was accused of having a love affair with a fellow scientist, Paul Langevin, a married man and best friend of her late husband.
They had a pied-à-terre near the Sorbonne, and for some reason they left their love letters there. The result of that was that Madame Langevin, Paul Langevin's wife, hired someone to break into the pied-à-terre and steal the love letters, went to the press with them, and that became then the source of an enormous scandal in France about this love affair.
The press loved it. They accused Marie Curie of wrecking Paul Langevin's marriage. In retaliation, Langevin challenged the paper's editor, Gustave Terry, to a duel.
11 a.m. November the 26th. It's apparently a foggy morning. Langevin has arrived first. He's described it picking and pulling at his moustache as he nervously walks up and down. And now here comes his combatant, Gustave Terry, the journalist. This battle is going to be held according to the laws of the duel, a handbook written in 1906 by Emily Bruno de Laborie. Painlevé, Paul Painlevé, is to conduct the combat. He gives his orders. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3, fire. Langevin pulls his pistol out, points it directly at Terry. Terry pulls his pistol out, but points it directly at the ground. Langevin does not pull the trigger. He lowers his pistol to the ground, and the duel is over without a shot being fired.
In the middle of this madness, the Nobel Committee awarded Marie another prize, but they told her not to collect it for fear of embarrassing them.
This, I think, led to one of her most courageous moments, because she wrote back saying, I had believed that the Nobel Prize was being given for my work as a scientist and that my private life wasn't relevant, and I'm coming to accept the prize. And she went to Stockholm and accepted the prize.
Irrespective of Marie Curie's personal life, her work dominated scientific thought. Radium was transforming science.
And out of this discovery of radium, radioactivity then could be studied. And out of that we have come to understand really the structure of matter, the structure of the atom.
Scientists showed that there's a vast amount of energy locked inside the atom. Energy that could be harnessed as a fuel, kill cancerous cells, and obliterate whole cities. Marie lived to witness the implications of her work, and her life ended in a bittersweet way. She showed superhuman determination and courage to the very end, but was eventually overpowered by the very thing that she'd created. 32 years after Marie Curie discovered radium, it got the better of her. She died of what was then a mysterious blood disease, which was probably leukemia.